This is going to be the Skeptics Guide, not for the universe, just for technology in the future. And this is Nick. Nick will tell you a little bit more about himself, I'm sure, before his little presentation. But I met you for the first time last year, and it's because I interviewed you on my show, Skepticality, for the book you wrote, which is kind of like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. And it's really kind of as a funny book. It's really cool. But he does a lot more than that. A lot of the stuff he can't talk about because he's a government guy. He is the conspiracy. I will let Nick take it away and tell people why we're going to have killer robots in about, 10, 15. It's always 5 years away, right?
That's why we call it the Skeptics Guide to Future Technology, okay? So let me give you 2 minutes about myself for those who don't know me. My name is Nick Eftimiades. And as Derek was mentioning, I wrote a book recently called Edward of Planet Earth, which is a comedy, a sci-fi comedy, and where we take a look at the technologies 200 years from now and really how they impact humanity. So all those things you've been thinking about, hearing about genome alterations and nanotechnology and flying cars and you name it, anti-gravity works and stuff, and were that to actually come into being, molecular manipulation to the point where you can redo materials into other things, right? So, and were that actually to come into being, how that would impact humanity. And it's the adventure of this guy as he goes through sort of a quest dealing with religion and facing those challenges. So that's actually how we met. My background, just work-wise actually, for the past 30 years I've been in the government. I spent 7 years in an organization called the National Security Space Office, leading architectures to integrate civil, military, and intelligence generation after next space systems, right? So it's not next generation, but the following generation, and to integrating those architectures for our national security space programs. I came back from 7 years in that world, and this is just sort of my recent past years, to 3 years being the lead technical expert in the Futures Division, to following that to being the chief of the Space Division, and did my last 3.5 years overseas as a science and technology liaison to Europe, based out of London. So that's my background in a nutshell. I should also tell you, in that, is that obviously today anything I say doesn't represent the Department of Defense or the U.S. government in any way, shape, or form, okay? So don't run out of here and say, you know what the Department of Defense says? Because the Department of Defense didn't. It's just me, okay? So please take it that way, and I doubt they would agree with me on a lot of these things anyway. So the purpose today, and I'll tell you, I'm going to do a little different format so I don't put everyone to sleep. I have a couple of videos that I'm going to kind of interject here, and because I think the visualization is sort of a more powerful way to see some technologies, and these are all commercial technologies that are currently being worked on. We'll take a look. I had to bin these technologies, right? And you know what? By one thing of background, the reason this fits in under a skeptics track is because, as Derek said, it's always 5 years away. And if you buy this, everyone will tell you, and Lord knows I've seen enough of it, where we can do this and we can do that, and we can make people's ears float, whatever. I mean, it's just you pick your technology, your crazy technology, and everyone can do it. And I only need $14 million, for startup. Okay, you spend $3 or $14 million, and what do you get? Well, we only need another $26 million. Nothing ever. You find this out. So, and it's not that people are charlatans, as the phrase might have been called. It's just that the technology is never easy to get to, right? And so it takes a long while, and when you take a look at budgets and wonder why things cost so much, it's because they do. And actually coming through a developmental process, getting something to a TR, a technology readiness level where it's usable up in a scale, takes a lot of time and effort. And people in this business often underestimate what it takes to get from A to B, or if they can even get to B. Right? So the technologies we'll look at today are basically in bins, and I'll describe a little about how we got to those. So we'll look a bit at nanotechnologies, manipulating materials at atomic molecular scale, especially to build microscopic devices such as robots and such. We'll go through some of the applications of nanotechnologies by the thousands. Genetic engineering, we'll have a little discussion on gene modification, manipulation of organisms' genomes using biotechnology. Robotics, that's going to be a real fun part because that is very, very close to us, and you'll see that in your daily lives in the very, very near future. And already seeing that. A couple of comments we'll do on distributed energy production. And I choose those words very, very carefully because we'll go through a whole discussion on solar power and applications and things. But part of this is the technology is great and advancing. So what, right? I mean, we're looking at things here individually that really impact humanity and change, for lack of a better term, change the direction of humanity. Okay, so if you get a watt cheaper, if you're buying a watt cheaper, for in your electrical consumption, okay, that doesn't really change. It doesn't change humanity a whole lot. If we have distributed energy production, and I'll describe that to you, that really changed humanity a whole heck of a lot. Okay, so we'll go to some of those nuances here. Some elements of manufacturing and industrial production, miniaturization of sensors, telecommunications, and computing. One thing, as we go into this, part of the selection criteria that I looked at in looking at some technologies here was if it was evolutionary, okay, as opposed to revolutionary. First off, if it was real, I mean, currently being worked on, and then evolutionary. And by that, what I mean is that you cannot predict, the unpredictable. You cannot predict a technology that comes out of left field. Because technology development in some senses is not linear, right? Someone comes up with a technology or a gene splitting technique or something like that that is completely unexpected, right? Comes out of nowhere, no one expected this, and it dramatically impacts the way humanity is. Those are some technologies, but they're not predictable. These are predictable, and they are predictable because they've been worked on now. Money's, they're being funded. We see some elements of success now. And in a technology development process, as you move along to be able to get from A to B, if you will, on commercializing or going into production on a technology, I mean, there's a fairly assured process. Some things get more difficult on the way, but you can definitely get through it. So those are the technologies that we're looking at. Does that make sense? I mean, things are evolutionary, sort of linear, and can actually be charted in their growth and development. Okay? All right, so in the elements of nanotechnologies, and we have several, nanotechnologies that we'll talk about. I'm sure you've heard about things like nanobots, small little, robotic, small robotics that can actually be injected into the human body and detect things like cancer, detect those types of cells detection, cancer, and even destroy them, then put other things in that can be destroyed. So we're talking about nanobots on a micro scale that can actually, work inside your body. Cure diseases, go after injured tissues, remove injured tissues, and a scale which really changes the dynamics of how we do surgery and how we address things like cancer and disease and issues like that. So we have a lot of the stuff that's actually in development now, and I will tell you, so the Department of Defense, for example, its R&D budget is, I think, $11 billion, I want to say, plus or minus, billion here, billion there. And yeah, sooner or later you're talking real money, but and everyone thinks of DARPA, okay, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is a big part of it. But if you actually look at the way the department is structured, there are all the service elements. There's the Air Force Research Labs, Air Force Office of Scientific Research, which does, basic R&D, 6162 they call it, basic level R&D. Office of Naval Research Labs, Army Battle Labs, yada, yada, yada. So there are a lot of service lab elements, which are all doing advanced technologies. You'll see some of those in here. There are the National Lab System, Sandia, Los Alamos, Lawrence, Livermore, in front of the National Lab System, which are also doing advanced technologies. And then one coordinating body, which has changed names over recent years, the Deputy Director for Engineering and Test and Evaluation, I think it is, or something like that, which actually theoretically coordinates all of that type of R&D. And that is just one little teeny tiny slice which happens to be the Department of Defense, right? Then you have, everything from the National Science Foundation to NASA to NOAA to all other agencies within the U.S. government. And again, the U.S. government is just one small part of things. And you have all of industry and all of academia. Now, there's a lot of bleed over, government funds things, academia funds things, industry funds things, right, depending on their interests. But you have a massive, massive R&D not only within the United States, but globally as well. And U.S. actually dwarfs everybody else in this. But there is massive effort going into a lot of these technologies that we're going to see. So the applications, for nanotechnologies are not just things like little robots, but there are thousands of things. The antibacterial soaps that you get, right, are all nanotechnology applied. Materials today, another nanotechnology enters either the food market or industry at the rate of 3 to 5 per week. Okay, so you have nanotechnologies that are whether it's the alteration of chemicals and materials, putting stain-resistant materials, all the stuff that you buy every day are all introductions of nanotechnologies being put in different chemicals being created, different properties and materials being developed. And to get through things like the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to be able to introduce 3 to 5 a week. So last I counted was something about 2,000. That are in everyday products. That's an incredible number. By the time 20 to 30 years comes around, it is going to be in virtually everything. So we see that in food, we see that in medicines, the applied medicines. This is a really cool one, that some of the nanotechnologies that have been applied. Within 20 years' time, you will never, ever, ever have a tooth drilled. Ever. Okay? You won't. There'll be no more filling cavities like that. So, any younger in the people crowd who want to enter dentistry, you got to sort of stay abreast of the technology and keep it applied. Because this is actually developed by a place I taught for the last I taught at King's College in London for the last 3 years. I actually sent an email and asked them a bit about this. So they came up with a technique, a 2-step method, to repair the damaged enamel on the outer layer of a tooth, and then to use tiny electrical currents to push minerals into the tooth to repair damaged site. And so in the questions that I asked is, is this just filling it? No. Your tooth actually grows and remineralizes. Not filling. Do you have to drill it out? No. No drilling at all. You can have the worst cavity, leave it, it'll just regrow and remineralize right there. Painful? Absolutely not. You will not feel a thing. Have you done it? Yes, we have. On humans? Yes. We have successfully done this. Cool. What are you doing with it? Well, actually, the answer to your question is yes. It's the machine that they use and the process that they use for putting this basic nanotechnology, minerals into your mouth, and then with electrical currents, which are less than the current things that they use to detect pulp, so you don't feel it. There's an old saying, like sort of in South Asia and such, where they say, to be clever as a Brit. So King's College is, no dummies, as you can imagine. So they quickly, when they did this successfully, turned around and created a commercial company. The university created a commercial company because they're not dumb. And so how long before this comes to market, commercial market? This will be commercially available in 3 years. Yeah, so, take it from one who's been to Hungary back and forth to have implants and things like that. This is something I wish was around. A couple of years from now, your kids or years from now are never going to suffer that pain. So, sorry, do you want to do questions now? All right, go ahead.
How long is on the
Mike.
How long does it take for the tooth to heal?
Yeah, that was, the one question I didn't go back and forth with was how long does this actually take? Like once you remineralize it? But I got the impression it was pretty, not immediate while you're there, but pretty much within weeks that it's done and finished.
So would I have to go for weeks with the hole in my tooth?
No. Yeah, no, they actually put the stuff in and they electrify it and it starts to grow and then it just continues to grow.
Oh, okay.
So.
Thanks.
People
Yeah, I know, this is,
So if it grows over a week, what do? You have a liquid diet and down a straw?
all right, so we're getting past, I don't want to give you bad information, but the impression I got from the way it's done is that they put minerals in, they electrify it, and I guess that it sits there as the tooth grows and basically mineralizes that mineral.
Sort of like a little pouch to connect to the tooth?
I think it just grows into what you would have had as a filling there, but it just basically grows through it.
Okay, thank you.
And they actually repair the enamel around the tooth entirely first. All right, more on the teeth. Okay.
So what stops it from growing?
You know what? I actually have the. If you want to come up later, I have the POC for King's College. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to have you. Hey, we got this briefing at Skeptics. What? Yeah, we'll save that to the next issue. So there are other things that's going on. DARPA, in fact, came out with this one with Department of the Army they had detected something along the lines of 1,500 soldiers a year that get infections from blood transfusions. So they actually have a way through nanotechnologies of cleansing blood. So you go through the transfusion process that actually takes blood from one, cleans it, cleanses it, as it goes into the other individual. So, I mean, it's, forget the military, it's 1,500 cases a year. You think about the thousands and thousands and thousands of times that'll be used in hospitals all over the United States and the application, or all over the world, forget the United States, and the applications for health on a broad scale. On the molecular level, look, we're already splitting genes. We're removing defective genes, processes to identify those things early to be able to cure diseases. This is just at its very, very infancy. Properties to alter genes, to inject synthetic genes, to give things different characteristics. And that's already been done. In fact, commercially available if you want to buy genetically engineered fish. So these fish, which are online, they cost about $19 a piece, are called glowfish. And you can buy them, and they glow. And they took a gene from a jellyfish, I guess it was, specific gene from a jellyfish, injected the gene into the genes of the fish, and they came up with a fish that now they have fish that glow in all different colors. When they reproduce other fish that glow. Now, this was actually done initially out of Singapore. The first steps in this technology, and it's a few years old at this point, were done out of Taiwan. And they were looking to develop a fish that when it got around certain pollutants in the water, that it glowed. So that they could release these things and detect where certain pollutants are. Well, I mean, no one, again, saw the commercial applications for just some fun, and I guess there's a company out of Texas now that sells these things. And so you remember the Big Bang Theory where Sheldon wants to create glow-in-the-dark fish? So this is it. It actually exists. And for like $18 a piece, you can buy your genetically engineered fish. So, I mean, okay, commercial application, which is sort of just fun and games, entertainment, but if you think about the extraordinary implications of 20 years from now, being able to alter genes in anything from humans to other to mammals to other living organisms is just extraordinary, and you could even say frightening, because everyone throughout the world is not going to play by the same rules on this. Right? So we'll have that, and that's just things that are intended, no less for people who have unintended applications for these types of things. There's a lot of this stuff, nanotechnology and biotechnologies, can be weaponized as well. So there's huge implications for this for the species. All right, so let's talk a bit about robotics, and this is sort of a fun area. The picture on the lower left, I took it at the U.S. Air Force Academy, and that is actually what the guy's holding is a little headset which transfers your thoughts, your brain waves, into brainwaves. That sounds so sci-fi. Transfers thoughts into a computer, into instructions, and this is, not connected. It's Wi-Fi, basically, or Bluetooth, I would guess, and transfers into the computer, which then transferred it to the robot. So you, by thought, tell the robot to come down the hall. It does this, it does that, it does as you command it. So the guy who did the demonstration, this was done by a student at the Air Force Academy. So the demonstration of it has to be individual because it's for your thoughts. So his, which is already synced for him, doesn't work for me. So, and he drove the robot around the room just in thinking it and telling it where to go. So kind of, and I mean, this at a cost of $300, all with commercial products he bought. okay? Let's take a look at DARPA's prosthetic hand. And, uh-oh, that one didn't go. Or did it? Well, let's not take a look at DARPA's prosthetic hand. Sorry, I apologize for this. I wanted to link all these things, but not within the time frame. Okay, so what that in fact is you're looking at the Luke Skywalker hand and sort of the first generation of it. So the one thing, you know, it's horrible to say, but if war gives you anything, the greatest advances in medical science have come out of the fact of war. You know, we never operated on a person's chest or brain or anything until it came around to war. People actually had to. So just extraordinary advances have been made in the field of medical science and technology. Right? And the United States has been through 10 years of war, and I'm sorry to say it hasn't invested in these areas beforehand, but it did during the course of war, in particular prosthetic devices. So the arm that you're looking at is sort of a first generation. The Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab has been doing this a lot with DARPA funding, and the thing that makes the devices so extraordinary is that they weigh the exact same amount as the person's other arm. They take the sensors, they translate the sensory perception, the sensors from muscles, they translate the electronic signals into movements for the hand and for the fingers. So the hand and the fingers moves exactly as, or you know, for as much as can be approximated, exactly as a human hand does, and it's all done with the person's, you know, brain. Pick up this, turn that, hold the cup. In addition to that, there are sensors within the hand and along the arm. And the sensors, and this is why, remember how we started off with the miniaturized sensors are such an important component of future technology? And this is why, because the sensors within the hand gauge how much pressure is being put on. So you're not crushing a paper cup. You have sensors within there that are saying something's hitting my hand, I'm closing too much, I'm doing this and that. And that's what the prosthetics now are at this level. Okay, so that's what they're trying, what we are developing for people who have suffered in the battlefield. That's what the government and labs and commercial outfits all over the world. The Brits have this virtually the same sort of technology. So that's the level of technology that's being developed at this point. So go 20 to 30 years from now. 20, 30 years from now, I will tell you folks, this will be not quite the Luke Skywalker where, you know, it shuts the hand and it touches him and he goes, ow, ow, you know, not quite like that, but not too far off it. You know, you will have arms and limbs that have sensitivity, you know, all the way through, and a person will be able to go pretty naturally with them over the next couple of decades, because we're just at the cusp of that now. Okay. There is one video that I am hoping works, which is Sprocket. Now, Sprocket is a robot from Lockheed Martin, and it has about 6 terabytes of... Are you hearing that? Yes? Are you not hearing it?
Can I work at McDonald's?
You can, but it's not enough to support yourself. Unless mom and dad are going to support you the rest of your life. I don't think so.
Probably not.
They're probably waiting for you to support them.
We lose the audio?
Well, you first have to go to support.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, I think we lost the audio there. You got it? Okay. So, all right, let's go back here. So I'll just describe to you what's going on in my experiences with this robot. So the individual is talking to the robot, which is 7 terabytes of data or something in its head, and just for a minute, close your eyes and imagine if it didn't have a mechanical voice, you know, how much you would wage that you were talking to a robot and its answers, okay? Now, I will give you a little heads up. When I spoke to this robot, I spoke to it, and it answered me. As you're seeing, it's talking to this kid here and telling him about college. That's what they did. They got the robots to talk to kids about college. When I talked to it, I started speaking in Chinese, followed me, didn't miss a beat. Didn't miss a beat. I went into Greek, followed me, didn't miss a beat. So, it was, and its Greek was a heck of a lot better than mine. So, I was, I figured, okay, I got, speak Chinese, okay, I got this nailed. Nope, not even close. So, here it is again.
Right? So you need to know that, right?
Right?
Unless Dad has a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then you need to ask them what percentage of the students at Hines graduate and get jobs, right?
What if I don't want to go to college?
Well, you need a trade, so you're going to have to go someplace and get a trade.
Can I work at McDonald's?
You can, but it's not enough to support yourself.
Oh.
Unless Mom and Dad are going to support you the rest of your life. I don't think so.
Probably not.
They're probably waiting for you to support them.
Are you hungry?
No, are you?
Yeah, I'm a little hungry.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you first have to go to some more tables.
They got candy at the table?
I don't know, but you need to find out about school.
All right, well, I'll talk to you later, huh? All right.
Okay, I'm going to question you.
All right.
Go check it out.
All right. Wow.
Okay. Yeah, so. Right, so this actually, I have a couple of videos. So I want you to think for a moment about that capability, what you saw, that, for lack of a better term, intelligence. Avoid the term discussions here. But, so think about that with some robotic mobility. Now, this is Asimo. Japan actually started in '86, but the real developments in this have been just over the last 10 years. The U.S. has a similar robot. They're sort of in competition.
お飲み物をお伺いします。
ホットコーヒーお願いします。
Obviously, all talking about it at the same time to confuse it.
おばさん、コーヒーですね。有泉さん、ミルクティーですね。それでは少々お待ちください。
So you're getting this is all automated. There's no one controlling this.
Asimo was created by Honda's research and development subsidiary.
Okay, actually, folks, that goes on a bit, but in the interest of time, if anyone wants, we could bring it up later. But there are a few other things to get through. So there is, of course, Google Car. How many are familiar with that? Okay, so we won't go through that. They're obviously not the only ones doing it. You know, an automated self-driving car. There are a lot of universities have already done that, done cross-country runs in automated self-driving cars, things like that. So it's a pretty, standard technology that's being developed. 20 to 30 years from now, if you start applying and taking things like facial recognition, which you saw from Asimo, and adding it to the type of, for lack of a better term, intelligence or data capability, whatever you want to call it, with Sprocket, the Lockheed robot, start putting in the mobility issues that we have, and you have, 20, 30 years from now, a couple of generations from now, you're going to have an unbelievable robotic capability. And, Derek's always asking me when's the robot invasion coming and when's it taking over. There are a couple of other extraordinarily advanced technologies that see them in this military context, but then consider what they'll do in the civil world.
The holy grail of all robotic vehicles, keeping flesh and bone from ever having to go in harm's way. For sheer brute strength, nothing can match the Crusher.
The Crusher can negotiate very difficult terrain and can do so by itself without any human involvement.
They can figure out how to get from point A to B, and they can also figure out how to get there so that they minimize the chance of being seen.
No other vehicle has the kind of mobility the Crusher has.
Weighing in at 6.5 tons, the Crusher can also carry up to 4 tons of payload, so you don't want to get in its way.
The vehicle goes through different kinds of rough terrain. Sometimes by plan, sometimes not by plan, it can survive.
It plans a path and it attempts to drive that path. But when it encounters an obstacle, then it plans an alternative route.
This is an Army system, and mission completion is the goal.
While the smaller Mule is designed primarily to work alongside soldiers, the Crusher likes to work alone. Highly autonomous, it can tackle almost any mission imaginable.
It can be fitted with weapons, so you're going to have a robot which could, in theory, be able to go around the corner, find an enemy, and destroy that enemy without putting any soldiers at risk.
To help it achieve all these objectives, the Crusher has to be stealthy.
The vehicles are hybrid electric, so they can run with engine off. They can sit and watch quietly for a long, long time. And in fact, I think one of the biggest uses for one of these vehicles is simply reconnaissance. Just go and look quietly.
It also has to be extremely tough.
We've made these vehicles very resilient. We have a skid plate underneath that's suspended by rubber. We put an energy-absorbing front bumper on it, and we have tires.
Okay, so you get the idea here. Doesn't matter day or night. It can see through day or night. You can set it and forget it and give it GPS coordinates and say, go look here, go conduct reconnaissance here, and it goes all by itself. It'll take a look and say, hey, there's a gully there. There's less likelihood I'll be seen there. I'll run that ravine. I'll turn around. I'll go up and I'll find this location and park myself there and wait. I mean, the robot does that all by itself. So we start to get to a level of autonomy, in military systems. And folks, when we first went into theater in Iraq and Afghanistan, I don't think there were any robots in theater, right? And there are now about 11,000. So, and I'll quote a two-star general, which I probably shouldn't. I'll quote it. God damn it, Eftimiades. More things important here than testing new technology. So that's. So there's a lot that's being tested, in an area of operations, as you can imagine. Last but certainly not least, for the videos, I did want you to see Boston Dynamics. It is a company that Google just bought that was funded a lot by DARPA and some other DoD money. This is just showing the dexterity and the ability of a robot that it built. This is a offshoot of the Big Dog robot. So with that thing walking down the street, if you were to walk over and try and kick it, its legs would slip like you would see a dog on ice or something, but it wouldn't fall. All right, so one of the biggest applications for a robot like this, and many, many others, are for disaster areas. For something collapses, and I mean, we had robots going into Fukushima, so you have a disaster, and you can send in 10, 20 years' time, even now, you'll send in some, but 20 years' time, you'll send in hundreds of robots, autonomous robots, that'll just go in and collect data and have sensors, again, those miniaturized sensors, for, to tell people what's going on. It is cool, isn't it? I mean, even if you had 1,000 of those in a forest going through looking for a plant or, a lost kid, yeah, exactly. The applications are endless for this. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the big dog. Yeah, in fact, there's a lot of good video footage of them offloading. They carry about 400 pounds. And as you'll see, the soldier in this video just says, follow tight, and things just comes in behind him and follows at a certain distance. So the first versions of this were really noisy, and they put in a whole system of baffles. So you see the person in front, and wherever he goes, it'll just follow. This is one of the earlier, louder versions. So this will be cool next time you're moving house or something like that, Load it up with 400 pounds and tell it to go 6 blocks away and up the stairs. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to jump over this because I think this one's a bit long and mainly focuses on just suspension systems. So what is so interesting about these, as you'll see, is the ability to start developing the technology to independently, right, without a human guiding it, to start navigating things like stairs. There's one where they have a ditch, and this thing sees the ditch and actually sees a little 3 inches on either side and puts its foot, 1 foot on either side to get across the ditch and to sneak over and putting arms out. So it's so see, it assesses the situation, puts its arms out to catch it at the wall, jump, faces that ditch. Okay, so this is the last one we'll look at. Now, I didn't have time, but there's a video of this running around a parking lot, without any of the cords on it. So this cheetah, save you the suspense, has been clocked at 29 miles an hour. So how'd you like to be on the road and watch this running by you? Yeah. If you can imagine the balance it takes, I mean, just to put in the computer to be able to calculate this. I mean, all pause, if you will, at one point, and the same thing with the Asimov robot, which runs at one point, the whole thing is off the ground. So that's, it's an extraordinary achievement. And again, and this is even, in fact, this video is a couple of years old. So, just quite literally, year by year, this technology just increases exponentially. It's amazing. Yeah. And because this part of it was funded by the military, they're of course going to show how strong it is, and then it'll get down and do some push-ups. Yeah, it actually does in the next scene. I'll stop it now, but it does in the next scene. It's just, I want to say, drop and give me 20, and it just sure does. Okay, I'm sorry, question?
Yeah, what about energy supply?
Funny you should ask that. I will give you your $1 later. So, other game-changing technologies, energy production. By the way, drones I mean, I have a whole series of videos, but I'm not going to bore you with those on drones because I think they've hit the press so much everyone knows about them. So if you consider drones and the ability of autonomy, I mean, we already have robots that are running around GPS-guided on the ground, okay? We have, there are drones that go to A to B, set the GPS coordinates, it goes from A to B. Doesn't need you at all. So, drone delivery of freighters, I mean, robotic ships, absolutely. I mean, we have now robotic ships. But to have all that for freight delivery robotically, easy. I mean, easier than any of the stuff that you've seen here. Actually, the same thing with planes. It'll take humanity a while to get over to having no pilot on a plane, but it's, and I don't know that it ever will, but it is technically, it's clearly, a doable thing. So we have flight, and for cargo, that might be a good answer. Just put the cargo, fly it, put it on a plane, and let the robots take care of it. And let the computers take care of it. And this is all current, okay? Now, fast forward that 20 to 30 years, and the advances here are going to be extraordinary. The policy and the law to keep up with it, that'll be probably the slowest point. I mean, how do you start regulating when it's just as easy for you to put to go do some automated reconnaissance over an area for traffic or for something like that when you're in your car, or to send products or special delivery products and to send them all through drones and to have all that? I mean, the FAA has got quite a job in trying to manage that throughout the United States, no less globally. So a huge challenge to humanity coming up just from policy, legal considerations, no less, and which is being driven by the technology. Okay, so your question on to energy production. So let's look a bit at energy production, manufacturing, industrial, miniaturized sensors, those categories I mentioned sort of have offshoots. This is the problem with energy production. And I'll tell you the problem is because when people think of solar energy and they think of other energy microbial generations off water generating electricity from power, which I'll talk a little about in just a minute, they always think of themselves. And they think of, you are not necessarily typical around the world, okay? You live in cities or you live in towns and there are power lines dug and there's, saying try living in the middle of Africa or Latin America or some incredibly far out mountainous region where you don't have that type of the industry, where the society doesn't have the industrial capability to bring you power, to bring you telecommunications, doesn't have the infrastructure developed, okay? Doesn't have I mean, how do you go get some industrially built product if you're in the middle of a village 50 miles from anywhere? I'll tell you how you go. You go 50 miles and you go to the nearest place which happens to have that type of thing and you buy it. Now, that sets a lot of humanity back. Way behind where, your average American is. Or for that matter, your average European or any place else in, quote, the first world society. That's the difference. The difference is they don't have the ability to get energy the way you do. They don't have the ability to get products the way you do. Okay? So those two areas, energy production and distributed manufacturing, distributed production, that's why 3D printers are such a huge thing. Because you're just seeing the first generations now, and they're already making body parts and things like that with 3D printers, even printing organs, which has been done, right? I think out of Pittsburgh, has been done, even printing organs. Sorry? Livers? Liver? Really? Okay, I thought it was...
I got a liver in 10 days.
Oh, livers. Sorry, I was thinking kidney, but... All right, livers in 10 days? Who did it? Do you recall?
I can't remember.
Okay, so, I mean, I know that so, we're printing, literally printing organs as a 3D printer, and it is just the first decade that we have these things. So imagine it in 20 to 30 years when you're in a small little village and you have absolutely nothing and you can print the materials. I mean, right now they're printing sandstone, they're printing blocks for houses, for building houses, and you can print enough materials for a house in a couple of days. So that's how advanced, the technology is running along and as it is now. So let's, talk a little about some of the energy production. What you're looking at in the upper left-hand side is a benthic generator. It was developed by Naval Research Labs. When you put those, it transforms, I'll see if I get this correctly, microbiological organisms on the riverbeds and ocean beds, transforms their movements into electrical energy, their decomposition into electrical energy. And that little yellow thing sits on the surface, and it actually draws electrical energy. Now, the Navy's idea for stuff like this, to use that or to use wave generation, as you see on the lower left, is to have ships or submarines, underwater things pull up to it, charge up, and then take off again, in the middle of the ocean. To have a completely automated, hands-off, constant surveillance and things of the ocean, or movement of ships and movements of materials, all powering itself, in the ocean. That's one. There are countries all over the world, Norway, which has large, for lack of a better term, snakes in the water that use tidal currents for generation of power. There's the same thing in Australia as building, I think they've already midway through building 11 electrical generators which use current, which are also desalination plants, which use current to power the generators, to desalinate water, to power local cities as well. So, there are a lot of solutions that are coming out to environmental problems. A lot of those solutions are assisting in independent energy production. And independent energy production, as it comes into being, as solar panels get a lot more efficient, as we start doing, as things like benthic generators get a lot more efficient, those types of things, whether it's wind, electrical, current, biological organisms, whatever the power source is, the fact that they're being done at local levels or being implemented at local levels, 20 to 30 years from now really alters. You give these people an ability at life, for lack of a better term, the good life or a first world existence that they don't currently have, that they just see from the outside. So that, and needless to say, what we had discussed mentioned on the telecommunications, that's a huge component of that, particularly in the educational world. So we'll go, I kind of jumped into this slide already, the 3D printing, that type of distributed industrial production, robotics that are coming into that, as well as the 3D printing. There was a time when the vast majority of the population here was in agriculture. And when the Industrial Revolution came about worldwide, and the great land barons of the day said, what are you people going to do, eat your products? The land will be here forever. Well, right, land is here forever. But right now, between 1% and 2% of people in the United States are involved with agriculture. And in Europe, that's about 12, 13, 14%, 15%, depending where you are. The rest are not. And the same thing's going to be for industrial production. The vast majority of our population is involved in industry and industrial production. And it's not because jobs are leaving overseas. That is happening. But you know what? The technology is advancing so much. You have robots. And then eventually you'll have molecular engineering and to have nanotechnologies, self-replicating items, not organs, self-replicating machines. Why do you need humans? Really, honestly, I'll be brutally honest. You need humans to develop the systems, to repair the systems, to do the software on it. But outside of that, it'll be in the hands of machines. Civilization is changing this way. Okay, I will just say that, as you can see, for so many of these things, miniaturized sensors is sort of a driving force behind them, whether they're biosensors, chemical sensors, acceleration sensors, all have their applications. I'll make all this stuff available. You can go through it if you want, and my notes as well. But for each one of them, biological sensors that detect sugars, proteins, hormones, etc., for detecting on individuals, for doing it even as a distance. You remember the Star Trek, tricorder? Yes, we got versions of that now. We've got versions that plug into an iPhone now. So, these things in 20, 30 years from now are going to be the absolute norm. Okay, I think I'm not going to run through that part of it, but I think that basically does it for the presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Do you have a microphone? Yeah, please.
Yeah, so please.
Yeah, so this is awesome. Hooray. But I was wondering if there was anything...
I knew there was going to be a but after that.
Yeah.
Awesome, great but.
Are there any technologies that you hear about a lot that we should be perhaps more appropriately skeptical of in terms of how rosily they paint the future? Things that are sort of warning signs and whatnot.
Yeah, I think... I don't know quite how to answer that because, it's like an ocean of technologies out there. And there's just so much. There are different sides to every technology. Okay, that I would say. So for every great thing that you see in nanotechnologies, a self-replicating virus that kills a certain type of individual is not by any means undoable. I mean, impossible. It is absolutely possible. And, so you have good things that can evolve out of this and really, really horrific things that can evolve out of these technologies. One of the things I'm a little personally skeptical is launch studies, is launch aerospace and engines and I got the next greatest thing that's going to drive launch costs down. I know, there's an old saying, and it's that 2/3 of the world is, or 1/3 of the world is covered with water. The other 2/3 are covered with paper on launch studies. So, the propulsion technologies I've been a little skeptical of, but outside of that,
What's going on in terms of energy storage, or will you have to plug in your prosthetic arm every half an hour?
Yeah, huge deal. Batteries, which is, as I'm sure you know, is obviously, because you alluded to it, is probably the Achilles heel, or has been up until this point. A lot of progress has been made in the ability to store energy, but as you know, batteries have been very heavy. We've been held back by some of the technology, despite the fact of over $500 million invested annually, well over $500 million invested annually to try and increase that production. I don't know. I know there are some great advances that have been made. There's a lot of focus on living off the land, if you will, for a little lower energy use. And generators and things like that, using everything from solar to micro switches that pull power off weather and things like that for constant energy production to kind of supplement the lack of that you have in battery. So there's a lot of focus on that, but I don't know. I mean, there's some advances in it, but I'm not the best one on that. It's too big a field. I mean, I don't know anyone who has mastery over that. Sorry.
Has there been any progress in thorium reactors?
In what?
Thorium reactors. I've heard some talk about the tech and the excitement in the tech industry about it recently.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an area I know. Yeah, one of the negative, well, not the negative, well, one of the advances in this technology is that there's so much out there, from nano to biological to thorium reactors to you name it, that no one is an expert in in all of this. I mean, you're lucky if you have an expertise in one field. So no less to be able to conquer that. So rather than give you a half thought out answer, just not my field. Sorry.
Going back to Crusher, the robot, it made me think of the beginning of the movie RoboCop, where the robots are walking down the street, and then the little innocent boy comes out, and they shoot the innocent kid.
Yep.
And it was telling about they could weaponize the bot. Is there a way? I mean, have there been systems developed where they can detect hidden guns, hidden bombs? Things like that. I mean, I was just...
Absolutely. For miniature sensors, yeah. I mean, particularly on the explosive side, it's easy to do, right? Every time you go to the airport, they detect that. And, whether you're swabbing or detecting ion mass spectrometers and things that detect at some level of a distance, 1 particle per million or whatever it is, that they pick up the scent, for lack of a better term, of explosives. So the answer to your question is yes, absolutely. Can these things be spooked and spoofed rather? Sort of depends. There's always a countermeasure type of thing that comes in with those types of systems. But the question is, what do you do after you detect or suspect an explosive? So if I'm walking down the street and a robot comes up to me, which policing functions are a great place to do them. Reconnaissance, is a great place to put robots on the street for that. Does the robot incapacitate me? Does a robot shoot me? Does a robot just warn and track me as I'm going down the street? How does the robot react, whether it be in a combat situation or in our society?
So you said that in the future, robots are going to take some of the jobs, but there's going to be some more technical jobs?
Let's say robotics is going to take jobs, but go ahead.
But right now, most people don't have technical skills, and because of that, there's way too many people in the service industry. So are they going to fix that in the future?
Who's they?
I don't know.
How old are you?
16.
Okay, so let me tell you something. For the future, you are they. Just, honestly. if you have any doubt about it, just listen to everyone around you. You are they. So if you fix it for educational programs, great. Start with yourself. Take a look at what the future is going to be and guide your own career accordingly. It's a big society. There's a lot of forces pulling in different directions. Service-oriented society isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that everyone, works flipping burgers. It means everything from doctors to medical techs to hundreds to writers to, we are theoretically could be at the cusp of a new renaissance. People have that ability. Okay.
I have to wonder about 3D printers because you said that when they become available to developing countries and stuff, that's going to change them for the better because they're going to be able to get materials and stuff they otherwise couldn't get without walking like 50 miles. But I have to ask, how do you think they'll become available to those people? Because they'll be very expensive for a very long time, and even if they do get to the place where people in developing countries can afford them, there's still the issue of power and the general lack of infrastructure in those countries that'll make it difficult to maintain.
I understand what you're saying, but you know what? The computer was very expensive when it came out. Early on in the 80s, they were very expensive, and by the time the next 20 years come around, they'll be throwaways. We're pretty much approaching that now. So right now, you can get a small tabletop model of a 3D printer for $1,000. So if you were to get a super cool thing that could actually serve for replacing parts around the house and things like that, and really serve a small group of people who really need it or want to start a business for producing stuff on sort of a light industrial level, you probably put about $5,000 into it. So let's say in 20 years that drops to well below $1,000. So there are going to be X number of villages and X number of cities and people and groups like in here that'll say, I'll start my own business, I'll do it online, I'll sell parts, I'll do it locally for the immediate area and deliver them. Will it solve every problem for every little village everywhere? Yeah. But there'll be a huge percentage of a population, disaffected, percentage that's remote that it will solve the problems for. So, and that's just over time, you solve more and more problems.
I asked you this question last year, so I'm gonna see if your answer's changed. What keeps you awake at night?
What did I say last year?
No, I'm not telling.
All right, I'm sure it wasn't bills. I hope it wasn't bills, because that would have been something that kept me awake. Actually, I do, and I think I'll be pretty consistent. The two things that keep me awake are the threats and the type of biological and nanotechnology threats for the future. Because it's horrific what could be accomplished by an evil mind. And, if you've taken a look, the only thing you have to look at, Dr. Octopus and every other, we have a lot of PhDs who are evil minds out there. So those are areas that they really tend to focus on. So
that's what you said.
Yeah, that keeps me awake. And the other thing I got to tell you is the robotics thing is getting a little scary. The one small robot I didn't show you is about 1.5 feet long, and it actually pops itself up 2 stories onto a rooftop.
What?
Yeah, I could do that if you cut me the extra time, but or all right, when we finish up. All right, it's so when you start looking at little things like that can pop themselves up onto onto a rooftop.
Quite like others.
Yeah, really. Yeah, those are. So, yeah. So now that thing can run around and do surveillance or stuff. Or you know what? Seriously, if I had that thing, I'd easily put a weapon on it. Why not put a bunch of C4 on it and just your terrorists are up there, drive it right into them, game, set, match. So what keeps me up at night? Me leaving a window open on the 2nd floor and that coming into it. Okay, so you get the point. Sorry, next question.
Let me preface.
Okay.
let me preface this with perhaps I watch too much sci-fi. How much of this is susceptible to things like EMPs, and is that actually something people might be using in the future?
Is something like EMP something to use in
Like
the future?
EMPs, like to take out electronics citywide as a weapon.
Yeah, it's, you know, you got to really do a lot to toast a place with EMP. So is it doable? Yeah.
But I
Well,
mean,
of
if
course.
so much of a city is nanotechnology, wouldn't all that be more susceptible?
Not more susceptible, as susceptible.
susceptible.
Yeah, but the question is, why, you know, would you? I mean, you know, some of these things are just not. What you're going to find is, look, everything you've seen has extraordinary commercial applications. Everything you've seen will be on the commercial market. Forget the military. Everything will be in the commercial market because Boston Dynamics and 100 other companies who are doing this aren't stupid. They see, I mean, I've been in buildings where mail is being delivered by robots. So, you know, it's going to be all commercial. So I don't think your EMP is a huge threat. Things like this, these nanotechnologies are. Okay, I guess that wraps it up. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to come up and